The cafe door swung open with a soft bell, and every conversation paused for a heartbeat as a young woman stepped inside, her eyes swollen, her cheeks wet, her breath uneven as if she had been running from a storm that still clung to her. She didn't look around. She simply wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces of her world together. People noticed her, but no one moved, except for a quiet man sitting alone at the corner table, who lifted his gaze slowly, not with curiosity but with a sense of recognition, as if he understood what it meant to walk into a place carrying more weight than your hands could hold. He watched as she hesitated near the entrance, scanning the crowded cafe for even a tiny corner to hide in. Her breathing trembled when she realized every table was occupied. She wiped her tears quickly, embarrassed, ready to step back out into the cold. Before she could, the man stood up without a word, gently moving his coffee cup aside, and walked towards her, slow steps, calm posture, eyes soft, no intention of intruding, just a quiet offering of space. When he reached her, he simply pointed to his table and gave a small nod, as if saying, "You don't have to explain anything." She froze, not expecting kindness from a stranger, not in a world that had felt so harsh just moments ago. She looked at him with a mix of confusion and fear, unsure whether accepting his offer would make her look weak or desperate. But the exhaustion in her bones answered for her. She whispered, "Are you sure?" Barely loud enough to be heard. He responded with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his tired eyes, then stepped aside, giving her the space she didn't have the strength to ask for. He pulled out the chair for her but didn't sit back down. Instead, he walked toward the counter, leaving her alone at the table. She sat slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the wooden surface as she tried to gather herself. Her tears fell silently onto her hands, and she didn't try to stop them anymore. It wasn't a safe place she needed, it was simply a place where she didn't have to pretend she was okay. And somehow this corner table felt like exactly that. When the man returned, he carried not just his coffee but an extra plate, freshly made, steaming, aromatic. She looked up at him, startled. He placed the plate in front of her without a single word. He swapped her empty glass with a warm cup of tea he had paid for, then gently pushed his untouched food toward her. He didn't ask if she was hungry. He didn't need to. He could see the hunger, the kind caused not only by skipped meals but by days of emotional famine. She opened her mouth as if to explain, to apologize, to justify her tears, but he raised his hand slowly, not to silence her, but to reassure her that she didn't owe him anything. The gesture broke what little composure she had left, and she covered her face as quiet sobs escaped her. People glanced from their tables, some out of pity, others with detached curiosity. But the man's expression didn't change. He sat there with the stillness of someone who understood silence better than words. He ate nothing. He drank nothing. He simply sat on the opposite chair with his hands folded, eyes lowered, giving her the dignity of crying without an audience. He didn't offer cliches like, "It will be okay," because he knew promises mean nothing when someone's heart is breaking. He gave her the one thing people rarely offer, his undivided presence without expectation. After a long moment, the tremble in her shoulders softened. She wiped her tears again, this time slower, more controlled. She looked at the warm food in front of her, hesitant to touch it, but the aroma and kindness melted her resistance. She lifted the spoon with shaking fingers and took a small bite. It wasn't just food, it was a strange, quiet reminder that the world still had gentle places hidden inside it. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask what happened. But he noticed the faint bruise on her wrist, the way her phone screen lit up with repeated calls from someone she clearly didn't want to answer. She turned the phone face down quickly, shame lingering in her eyes. He saw everything but reacted to nothing. He understood that sometimes silence is the safest bridge between strangers. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely steady. She simply said, "Thank you, for this." He nodded once, not wanting to make her feel indebted. She added, "I didn't know where else to go." He gently pushed the napkin holder toward her and returned his hands to his lap. It was the smallest gesture, but it told her she didn't need to justify her pain to someone who wasn't there to judge it. She took deep breaths now, each one a little less heavy. Her tears had dried, though the ache remained, resting quietly beneath her ribs. She finally looked up at him more clearly, really looked. He looked like someone who had carried his own storms, who knew how to spot one in another person. His eyes held a softness that comes only after surviving something that changes the way you look at suffering. The cafe's warm lights flickered gently above them. Outside, The sky turned a darker shade of evening, and the windows glowed with reflections of cars passing by. Inside, everyone else returned to their own conversations, leaving the two of them in a small island of stillness. And strangely, she felt safer at that table with a stranger than she had felt with people she had known for years. After minutes of comfortable silence, he finally spoke, not questioning her past, but grounding her in the present. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "Just eat." His voice was calm, steady, and free of curiosity. It felt like a blanket placed gently over her shivering heart. She nodded, surprisingly grateful he wasn't pushing her to open up. She continued eating, her face softening with each bite. Not because the food was extraordinary, but because it tasted like compassion, something she hadn't been given in a long time. The man watched her from the corner of his eye, not intruding, simply making sure she didn't feel alone. It wasn't attraction, it wasn't obligation, it was humanity, rare and deeply fragile. At one point, her phone buzzed again, louder this time. She flinched. He noticed. Without speaking, he moved his cup slightly, drawing her attention to the quiet steadiness of the moment. She took a breath, held the power button, and turned her phone off. He gave a soft nod, showing her she had made a brave decision without needing his approval. As she finished eating, her posture changed. Her shoulders were no longer curled inward. Her hands no longer shook. She looked stronger, not fixed, not healed, but grounded enough to stand again. He gently slid the bill across the table, paid in full before she even arrived. She opened her lips to protest, but he shook his head lightly. It wasn't charity, it was a moment of kindness he knew she needed more than anything. She placed her hand over her heart, unsure how to thank someone who had given without asking, who had offered without expectation. "You don't even know me," she whispered. He responded quietly, "Sometimes you don't need to know someone to help them." The simplicity of the words made her eyes glisten again, but this time with gratitude rather than pain. She stood slowly, holding the warm cup of tea he had ordered for her. The cafe felt different now, less suffocating, more like a place where someone had breathed life back into her spirit. She looked at him one last time, memorizing the calm in his expression, the gentleness in his silence. She wanted to say more, to tell him how much his presence had meant, but the words wouldn't form. He stood as well, not to follow her or ask questions, but simply to acknowledge the moment they had shared. She walked toward the door with steadier steps, and for the first time in hours, her breathing didn't tremble. As she pushed the door open, the cold air touched her face, but it didn't sting like before. She turned back and whispered, "Thank you, for seeing me." He nodded once, then sat back down at the empty table, a table that, moments ago, had held a stranger's sorrow and a stranger's recovery. He took a sip of his now cold coffee and closed his eyes for a moment. He hadn't saved her. He hadn't solved her problems. He had simply given her a place to breathe. And sometimes, that small gift is enough to shift a person's entire night, maybe even their life.